Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. Appreciate you being here. I'm Richard Dansky, and tonight I'll be reading two stories for you. The first one is In the Shadows of the 603rd from the Achtung Cthulhu anthology. The 603rd was a real unit during World War II, which was tasked with creating fake props to deceive the German army. So they would do things like inflatable tanks, put on sound shows to make it sound like troops are moving, things like that. They had a lot of very talented folks who went on to be notorious in the New York art scene. But I was just thrilled with the possibilities of what you could do with that sort of unit and the Lovecraftian. So I sat down and I wrote this. Apologies in advance. Captain Rifkin was holding a tank over his head when the Jeep rolled up, which made saluting awkward. Carefully, he put the inflatable armor down in line with the dozens of others he and his men carefully constructed, then wiped his hands surreptitiously on his pants leg. Some of the paint had felt a little wet, and if he was going to be shaking hands with the brass, it wouldn't do to turn their fingers green. The brass, he saw, had already gotten out of their vehicle and started walking over. One he recognized, the second he didn't, and the third sent a current of worry down his spine. "Captain," said the gangling, moon-faced man in the lead, "I thought I told you no more of that crap. One picture gets out and the crowds figure out half the tanks they think they're up against are grade school art projects." "Colonel Harristy, sir." Rifkin snapped off a quick and largely pain-free salute. "With all due respect, these are professional art projects." He liked Harristy. The colonel might not have a sense of humor, but he understood how to put Rifkin and his men to good use. And after spending most of the war on the sideline, that was all they wanted. "We'll hang him in the Louvre after the war's over, if that makes you happy, but we can talk about that later. Right now, we need to discuss your new orders, which means I get to introduce you to Major Schiller." The second man stepped forward, and the little shock of worry Rifkin had felt previously amped itself tenfold. Schiller was hawk-faced and pale, with a nose sharp enough to cut cheese on, and unsettling blue eyes. He wore a uniform that Rifkin didn't recognize, cap tucked under his arm, and his hair was almost translucent white. He extended a hand, and after a second's hesitation, Rifkin took it. "Major Schiller, allow me to present Captain Henry Rifkin of the 603rd Camouflage Engineers, D Company. His men are very good at what they do, despite the man leading them, and what they do is exactly what you're going to need. Captain, this is Major Heinrich Schiller, and you're going to be taking orders from him for the near future." Schiller clasped Rifkin's hand with cool pressure. "A pleasure to meet you, Captain. Your company's work has won my admiration." "Thank you, Major." With some difficulty, he broke the handshake. "Schiller, is that a German name?" "Swiss." Rifkin frowned. "I thought you guys were sitting this one out." Schiller smiled thinly. "There are some evils in the face of which one cannot remain neutral." He opened his mouth as if to say more, and Harristy stepped in. "Plenty of time for that sort of thing later. Right now we need to talk nitty-gritty." He walked over to the Jeep and pulled out a briefcase. "If you please, Colonel," Schiller said, and took the case from him. He opened it up and pulled out a series of sketches while Harristy turned and motioned Rifkin over. "The good news is the bulk of their forces pulled away from the river crossing a vessel before the Brits started their boys forward. Thanks, I might add, in large part to what you and your people did here. Looks like they moved 2 tank divisions upstream to deal with your plywood panzers over there, which let us take the bridges last night." Rifkin smiled. Waging war with paintbrush and saw was not something every GI understood. His men actually getting credit for what they'd done was rare and encouraging. Schiller spread the sketches on the hood of the vehicle as Harristy kept talking. "The other good news is that you've got some fans at HQ, people who understand the value of what you do. They've got a special assignment for D Company, working under Major Schiller here. Top secret, top priority, whatever resources you need. You're also going to get a little help, part of the 3302nd SSSC, working with you." Rifkin nodded. "Sounds good, sir. What are we going to be doing?" Harristy glanced over at the cadaverous figure by the Jeep. "That's for Major Schiller to tell you. This one strictly need to know, and about 2 minutes you'll know more than I do. Major?" Schiller nodded, very slightly. "Thank you, Colonel. Captain, if you'd step over here for a moment." Harristy backed away as Rifkin closed in, glancing at the sheets of paper on the hood of the Jeep. What he saw on the paper didn't look like tanks. It didn't look like anything he'd ever seen. "What the—" The Major held up a thin hand. "Please, allow me to explain. Your company, it is not constituted of what one would call traditional soldiers, correct?" "No. We've got artists, carpenters, set designers, not a lot of dog faces, no. But if the war gets to the point where we're doing the shooting, we're in trouble." "We are in a great deal of trouble already, Captain," said Schiller, his tone so matter-of-fact that Rifkin shivered. "Which is why I'm here, and which is why I need your men. You build decoys, yes? Replicas designed to fool reconnaissance and intelligence. Fake tanks to make scouts think your American armor is in position 10 miles away from where it should be. In short, fakeries and frauds." "That's a cheap way of putting it, Major. What we do saves lives. It helps win fights. It Schiller waved him off. You misunderstood. What I said, I meant with the greatest respect for your craft and skill. To fool the greatest war machine Europe has seen since the days of Genghis Khan with painted wood and balloons, now that is art. And that is why I'm here for you and your men, because I need you to build this. A bony finger jabbed down to the pages on the hood. Exactly this, and quickly. The American leaned in to take a closer look. What he saw looked more like a set design than anything else, a series of shapes and forms that screamed Grand Guignol more than armored division. If you'd gotten something similar back in New York while putting together the set dressing for an opera, something from Wagner maybe, before Hitler put Wagner out of style, would have made sense, though he would have pushed back against a few of the details as too dark, too disturbing. But to see something like this in field, it made no sense. The arches in the background belonged on a stage or in a tomb, not in the forest of the Rhineland, and the writing on them seemed somehow obscene. He felt his head starting to spin and closed his eyes, blowing away the images. Could your men build that, Captain Rifkin? Schiller's voice cut through the murk in his brain. My boys can build anything, he replied, willing himself to stand tall, to ignore the nausea seeping into his gut. Why the hell do you want them to build that? Schiller stepped in and bundled up the papers. He handed them to Rifkin, who took them in nerveless hands. That is exactly why, Captain. Colonel. A plainly relieved Harristy lumped himself back into his jeep. Let's get out of here, Major. He turned to Rifkin. Captain will be sending transport for your people at 1800 hours. Don't worry about the tanks. Someone will be along to deflate them and put them in crates. Just get your men and their tools ready and prep a list of everything you're going to need to do that. Major? Schiller climbed into the jeep as well, and the driver gunned the engine. Captain, I look forward to working with you. And then the vehicle roared off, leaving Rifkin standing in the makeshift road with a fistful of papers and a knot in his gut. Do you spooky bastard? Do you really? He stared after the departing jeep for a long minute, then turned and started the trudge back to camp. The new campsite was further from the river, which was good, and on the far side of the hill from the location where Schiller wanted the thing, whatever it was, set up ready and go. The move had been accomplished with a minimum fuss or questions. Instead, the questions started after they'd settled in, and Rifkin had started explaining what they were doing. This doesn't look like anything we've been doing over here, Captain. The speaker was a lanky sergeant named Kelly, whom the 603rd had plucked out of the New York gallery scene. Before the war, he'd been an up-and-coming painter. Now his main focus was teaching the other men how to imitate camouflage patterns more precisely. You ask me? That's a stage set. Aerial recon sees that, they're going to pee themselves laughing. Doesn't make any sense to be doing it out here either, chimed in another one of his men, a short, wiry fabricator named Gleason. Why not build it someplace closer to the materials instead of hauling them all the way out here? Because your painting belongs in the woods where no one can see it, came a response from the back of the tent. Screw you, replied Gleason, and chaos erupted as the various men weighed in with their opinions of the project, why they were doing it, the quality of each other's work, and anything else they could think of. Rifkin let them go at it for a couple minutes, good for them to blow off steam, he thought, then stood up and shouted for quiet. In a few seconds, the tent had quieted down, except for a few final grumbles from Gleason, and most of the men were looking at him. Look, he said, I know this one's like nothing we've done since we've gotten here. I know it's a hell of a strange thing to be putting together on the battlefield, and I know it's pretty creepy, too. But none of that matters. We all spend years wanting to know when we'd be getting over here and telling each other we'd do anything to be in the field instead of twiddling our thumbs back in training. Well, now we're in the field, and this is what they're asking us to do. I don't know why, but why isn't my job, and it isn't yours either. Our job, yours and mine, is to make this thing they're asking us to make, and to make it right. Everything else is details. You got a problem with that? You come see me after. Right now, we need you to start getting ready, because supplies will be here in a couple of hours, and we need to be ready to hit the ground running. Dismissed. The men rose as several, breaking into small knots of discussion or argument and drifting out of the tent. Kelly remained behind as they went, waiting until he and Rifkin were alone before strolling over to the sketches of the work Rifkin had set up on easels. So what do you really think, Captain? He asked, staring at each sketch in turn. Deadline's tight. You think we can pull this off? Rifkin ambled over to join him. We put 700 inflatable tanks in the field after a month, from concept to deployment. We can do this in our sleep. Kelly pursed his lips before responding. All right then, let me ask the real question. Should we be doing this? It's orders, Rifkin said. Yeah, it's orders, but should we be following these orders? There's something about what they're asking us that doesn't sit quite right. Something in this, and he tapped on the sketches with his finger, is trouble. Trouble, said Rifkin, is doing a set building for a George S. Kaufman play and screwing it up. This Schiller guy, and what he's asking for? A piece of cake. I hope you're right, said Kelly, and left Rifkin in the tent alone. It was Kelly who made the first complaint, at least the first one brought to Rifkin's attention. Captain, he said, we've got a problem. Do tell, said Rifkin, as Kelly stepped down from the scaffolding we had been working. Progress on the site had been steady, though not as fast as Schiller wanted, and the main elements of the proposed architecture had risen steadily from the forest floor. Brawny engineers had brought in actual boulders for the borders of the central circuit once the wooden ones Rifkin's people were making been deemed insufficiently authentic, and a gigantic web of netting stretched across the roof of the dell where the entire operation was set up to hide it from prying aerial eyes. It's this writing, Captain. I can't work on it for more than half an hour at a time, tops, before I get dizzy. If I'm working up there, he leaned back and pointed to the top of the scaffold, which loomed 30 feet into the air. I'm sure to go ass over tea kettle sooner rather than later. Rifkin frowned. How many other men are working on the inscriptions? 3. They're all complaining of the same thing, but... His voice trailed off. But what? None of them wanted to complain. Didn't want to look soft. Didn't want to mess up the schedule. So it was up to me. Huh. Rifkin thought for a minute. Arms crossed. Schiller's already breathing down my neck about getting this done in time. Kelly shrugged. The way I see it, I fall off this thing and break my arm. It's going to put a way bigger wrench in the works than if I can bitch about this to you. All right, here's what we're going to do about it. He spat into the dirt, pissed off and impotent to do anything about it. From now on, anyone working on that crap does it in 15-minute shifts. I don't care what you're working on. I don't care if you're in the middle of something. 15 minutes on, you swap out with a man on the ground. You understand what I'm saying? Kelly nodded. Sure, Captain, but you sure? I mean, Schiller might... You let me handle Major Schiller, you understand? You paint. Now go tell the boys. Roger that. Kelly loped off, shouting. Rifkin turned the other way and walked toward the edge of the clearing. It was unseasonably hot, and the sun punched down even through the protective netting. Half the men were working shirtless, sweat pouring off them as they labored to make Schiller's vision real. Schiller's vision, that was getting in his men's heads and making them dizzy and afraid. He crossed the edge of the clearing, passing under the canopy of trees and into the cool of the woods. They'd clear out the bowl first thing, of course, chopping down everything and pulling out the stumps, but now he noticed the trees on the edge of the site were looking sickly. A ring of yellow leaves drifted down, and here or there the contagion had spread deeper into what had been a healthy-looking forest. He wondered if it were a coincidence. Somehow he didn't think so. 2 nights later, Schiller came to talk to him. It was well after midnight when the Major arrived. Apart from the guards on the perimeter, widely spaced and not terribly alert, as the nearest hostile units were well on the other side of the river and going backwards every day, the entire unit was asleep. Was wondering when you're going to show up, Rifkin said. Cigarette? I do not indulge, said Schiller, as he stepped out from the shadows between 2 of the trucks the 3302nd boys were using to haul their massive speakers into position. And neither should you. They blacken the lungs and invite disease. Fire is meant to be breathed out, not in. Whatever the hell that means. The captain stood, unraveling himself from the chair at the base of the plywood monolith. What can I do for you, Major? You can do your job. This, he waved to the ongoing construction, is not progressing fast enough. We have a deadline, Captain, one we dare not miss. And now you are slowing down the work. It'll get done when it gets done, Major. My men are working as fast as they can. They are working in 15-minute shifts. Rifkin blinked. How the hell did you know that? It does not matter how I know it. Nothing matters except you and your men following my orders and creating this work exactly as I have described. He jabbed Rifkin's chest. If that means they get dizzy, they get dizzy. If that means they fall, and you find men to replace them. But you will not stop, and you will not slow the work down, and you will not question me again. Do you understand? Slowly, Rifkin looked down at the finger planted in his sternum. Are you going to remove that, or am I? You're not listening, Captain. Schiller tilted his hand back, waggling the offending finger in Rifkin's face. You are important. You are not essential. None of your men are. They are merely convenient for the task at hand. You son of a bitch, Ida. Shh. Schiller suddenly whirled faster than should have been possible. Listen. I don't hear anything. That's because you are talking. Shut up. And with that, Schiller plunged into the woods. Rifkin tried to follow him and found his legs impossibly heavy, his arms locked by his sides. Tried to reach for his pistol, but the movement simply would not come. He tried to call out for help, for Schiller, he wasn't sure, but his jaw stayed resolutely locked in place, his rasping breath the only noise he could hear. And then there was shouting in German and the sound of pistols firing in the woods, so very close. Then more shouting and running feet on dead leaves, and then one last final shots. 2 minutes later, Schiller came trotting back out of the woods, a Luger PO8 in his hand and a slim grin on his face. Apologies for the interruption, Captain, but it was best I take care of that before we continued our discussion. Which is when the forces holding Rifkin in place suddenly evaporated, and he tumbled forward onto the ground at Schiller's feet. What the hell? That was for your safety. You are not equipped to deal with the servants of the Black Sun, and, as I said, while you are not essential, it would be inconvenient to lose you. The Black who? The men holding the leashes on the dogs of the Sonderkommando H, searchers after Wunderwaffe for their Führer, and worse. Rifkin climbed to his feet, 100 questions on his lips, but Schiller hushed him. Double your guards, finish the work, ask no questions, and you will hear no answers that will haunt your dreams. Now go to bed. If the Black Sun is aware of our little project, you'll need to work a little faster. He stared at one of the fake monoliths, a brooding monstrosity on the inner side of the cleaning, and fix that one. There's a bullet hole in it now, and that simply will not do. Satisfied, he turned and walked Rifkin stared after him until he vanished into the woods once again, the shadows swallowing him up with swift hunger. What the hell just happened? Killy came out from behind one of the plywood structures, scratching his head. I half thought he was going to bite your neck. That might come later. How much did you hear? Enough. You don't repeat a word of it, you hear? You don't go anywhere alone anymore. No one does. Whatever the hell this black sun thing is he's talking about, I don't want to lose anyone to it. Kelly pursed his lips. Seemed sensible. What are you going to do? Look for the bodies, though I don't think I'll find any. Keep things going. And pull every string I've got to find out more about what the hell we're doing here. Good luck with that, Kelly said mournfully and looked away. Rifkin found no bodies when he combed the woods, though he did find several small piles of fine gray ash. He thought about Schiller's comments about the Wunderwaffe, or wonder weapons, and shuddered, and half the guards on the site doubled. Work continued. Men fell and were replaced. Schiller visited with increasing frequency, demanding more and faster work until Rifkin nearly threw him off the site. Men complained of seeing and hearing things, dead-eyed ghosts in SS uniforms with strange insignia staring out from the trees, whispering voices that spoke neither English nor German, but filled listeners with unspeakable dread, and a bone-chilling cold that settled over the entire operation, even when it was 15 degrees warmer on the other side of the hill. Rifkin, once he'd calmed down, motioned those to Schiller. Schiller responded by telling him it would be nothing to worry about if he finished the damn project, less complaining, more construction. And so it rose, an outer ring of fake stones towering 30 feet in the air and covered in delicate, unreadable script. An inner ring of smaller stones, unadorned but aligned precisely according to Schiller's directions, so that the setting sun laid a peculiar path through the ring. A central fire pit, a dozen feet across and 10 feet deep, ringed with a circle of precisely laid out black sand. Next was the final piece of the puzzle, a mock-up of a titanic stone table, grooved around the edges with iron rings set in the corners. It made Rifkin feel uneasy just to look at it. When it was finished, with the last coat of paint dried and the last fake rock artfully arranged, she sent word to Schiller that it was done. Half hour later, the man himself was standing next to him, inspecting the site. It will do, I suppose, were the first word Schiller said. The third stone in the inner ring is 2 centimeters to the left of where it should be. The grooves down the center of the table should be straighter. Sorry, we're having a technical difficulty. And that, no, never mind. That'll have to do. We're halfway up the hill and 50 feet away, Rifkin said incredulously. You mean to tell me you can pick out those details from up here? A lot of men I know back home will call that hooey, the sort of thing you say to keep from paying a man once he's done a job for you. A lot of the men you know back home are idiots, Captain, Schiller retorted. I had not thought you were one as well. Rifkin opened his mouth to reply, but Schiller waved him off. No, better you do not speak. Now listen to me. You and your men are now barred from this place. It is off limits. My own people will guard it. Stay on your side of the hill, no matter what you see or hear, and do not return unless I call for you. Which you won't, I'm guessing. Schiller cocked his head. And once again, the captain makes me think he is clever. We are done here, you and I. Go back to your tent. Play your American records, loud, and harbor no dreams of heroics. Your work here is done. Major, I dismiss, Captain. That will be all. Snapping off a salute, Rifkin turned to march away. Behind him, he could hear Schiller muttering things under his breath. And if we were honest, he could hear something answering. It was raining when Kelly woke him, a hard, heavy rain that shot through with lightning that was a little too thick and a little too red to feel quite natural. Captain, Kelly said as he shook him awake, you got to hear this, Cap. What? Rifkin sat off the t-shirt he'd been sleeping in damp with sweat. He hadn't been more than half asleep to begin with the rock in his gut and the thunder in his ears, conspiring to keep him from dropping off for more than a few minutes at a time. Kelly, what's the scoop? Kelly put his finger to his lips, shushing him. Just listen for a minute. Rubbing his eyes, Rifkin listened. At first there was nothing but the steady thrum of the rain with the gurgle of water running down through the camp as a sodden counterpoint. Occasional rumbles of thunder, distressingly close, cut through the water sounds with deafening impact. But after a moment he picked up on something else, something low and ugly underneath the wheels of the rain, something that sounded like chanting. What the hell is that? He asked, though from the look on Kelly's face he didn't know either. It's not English, it's not French, it's not German, I'm pretty sure it's not Japanese. Hell if I know, Cap. I'm not sure it's even human. Kelly ducked out the front of the tent out into the rain. A flash of lightning illuminated his face, showing lines of worry and fatigue that hadn't been there when they started this damn project. But I do know where it's coming from. Rifkin knew the answer before he asked it. Where? The worksite. Son of a... He shrugged into his shirt, slid feet into boots, and secured his hidearm in his holster. Maybe we should go down there and see what's going on. Before Kelly could respond, another bolt of lightning stabbed down from the clouds. A blast of thunder powerful enough to knock Rifkin off his feet followed a millisecond later as the bolt smashed into the ground on the other side of the hill. Did it hit? Rifkin shouted as he staggered back to his feet. It hit the site, yeah! Kelly bellowed like a newly deaf man in a bar fight. Went right for it, past the trees and the hill and everything. Rifkin threw on a rain slicker and ducked out of the tent. We should see if there's anything left. Come on. With that, he took off into the night. After a second's hesitation, Kelly followed. It wasn't until they reached the top of the hill that Kelly caught up to the captain, and then only because Rifkin had stopped dead in his tracks. From where he stood, a natural break in the trees showed the scene in the valley below. What he saw there chilled him to the core. There was a fire in the fire pit his men had built. He could see that now, great tongues of flame reaching up in defiance of the rain. A ring of chanting, hooded figures stood around the central fire pit, casting long shadows across the inner ring of stones Rifkin's men had so laboriously created. The long, low slab next to the flames that had been jokingly called the altar was being used as exactly that. A woman in a tattered white robe lay upon it, bound hand and foot and screaming in German. Shadows danced against the edge of the clearing, not always in time with the leaping of the flames. At the center of it all, dressed in robes as red as blood and holding an ancient-looking dagger, stood Schiller. He held the blade up into the heavens, chanting something in harsh gutturals which cut through the rain and howling wind. As he shouted, bolts of lightning leapt up from the dagger into the sky, where they traced outlines of unspeakable faces in the roiling clouds. In the distance, across the river, similar bolts arced from ground to sky and back again, a matched set of impossibilities. Holy shit, said Kelly. You seeing what I'm seeing, Captain? I'm worried about what we're going to see next, Rifkin replied. The way our buddy Schiller's holding that thing around, I don't like that lady's chances. Kelly shook his head. I've seen things like this before. Some of the more decadent buyers back in New York like to dabble and pretend occult nonsense. Summon the spirits to make an opening go well, crap like that. But this, I'm thinking it's the real deal, which means that Fraulein down there is not cess dressing. Rifkin nodded. She's a sacrifice, or will be if we don't stop them. Kelly gave the grin a small one. Been waiting for you to say that since we started working with Major Schiller here. He never rubbed me the right way, and seeing what he had us do, making us part of this, I'm all for putting a wrench in his gears. The captain answered Kelly's smile with a slight one of his own. I'm not thrilled with having ordered you to put this little slice of hell together. Whatever's supposed to happen here, I want no part of it on my conscience, so let's go make sure it doesn't happen. Kelly pulled his sidearm, ticking it under his body to protect it from the rain. Captain, I thought you'd never ask. Side by side, the two crept from under the shadow of the trees. Schiller was still chanting, his acolytes interrupting him now and then to echo his words or bellow out a response. The blade of the dagger was reversed now, pointing down at the woman spread-eagled on the sacrificial stone. She'd gone past words now, and simply screaming, pure wordless terror, she screamed against her bonds. Rifkin reached the base of the largest of the fake monoliths his men had built, and tucked himself inside its shadow. A second later, Kelly emerged beside him, grim-faced. What's the plan, Captain? Around the outside till we're closest to Schiller, then we fire a few rounds which should scatter these jokers in the bathrobes. None of them look like they're armed, except Schiller. Gun beats knife. Yeah, but does gun beat knife that shoots lightning? I guess we'll find out. Still crouched, Rifkin headed to his right, timing his advances in the dark between lightning strikes. Kelly followed a few feet behind until they stood at the head of the circle. Schiller's back was to them as he concentrated on his task, while the hooded men chanted in frenzied rhythm, none looking away from the altar. Now? Asked Kelly. As good a time as any as Rifkin fired his pistol into the air as he charged into the ring. All right, Major, show's over. Put the knife down and step away from the girl. Schilling whirled, dagger still in hand, passed on the other hooded figures, turned as well, faltering his chant as they did so. On the altar, the victim twisted and contorted against the rope. Thank God, she said in a thick German accent. They're going to kill me. No, they're not. Rifkin stepped forward, the pistol leveled at Schiller's head. You, Major, you're going to use that fancy knife of yours and cut her loose, or I'm going to introduce your guts to some high-velocity lead. Idiot, Schiller hissed. You have no idea what's going on here, or what you are risking by interrupting. Seems pretty obvious to me, Kelly. Since the Major over here is interested in cooperating, go grab his pig sticker. Roger that, Captain. Kelly stepped out from behind him and took 2 long strides towards where Schiller stood. Captain, you do not understand. If you stop us now, the war is lost. Schiller's face was ashen, whether from fury or fear, Rifkin couldn't tell. What he could see was the dagger gleaming ever brighter in the ruddy light from the fire, and behind him in the long distance the lightning was still pouring down in time with the ragged chanting of the few hooded men still on point. The rest, the ones who weren't muttering ancient nonsense syllables, were edging toward Schiller, and by extension, Kelly. I don't see us losing the war by taking a slice out of some local dame, Major, Kelly said as he got close. Tell your boys to stay back and put their hands in the air, or a bunch of folks will get perforated. His pistol was in his fist, and he bumped Schiller's belly with the muzzle to emphasize his point. And that's when Rifkin saw the thing that froze his blood cold. Schiller smiled. If that is what you wish, he said, and raised his hands to the heaven in mockery of a pose of surrender. Kelly! Rifkin screamed, but it was too late. Even as Schiller stretched upward, the clouds reached down to him. A spiky rope of lightning punched down, homing in on the outstretched dagger before redirecting the blast into pure energy that punched Kelly backwards a dozen yards. He skidded to a stop, unmoving, at the base of one of the fake menhirs. Rifkin fired. The woman on the altar screamed. And the bullet hit the tip of the dagger and was vaporized by another burst of blue-white light. This is too important to waste time trying to convince you, Captain. Put down your gun and run, or deal with the consequences. But you will not, you cannot stop what is happening here tonight. Like hell I can't, Rifkin shouted and fired again. Somehow he missed. Schiller did not, whirling and bringing the dagger down to the chest of the captive. Her dying shriek was lost in the roar of the suddenly surging fire, which rose in a bloody pillar towards the electrified clouds. A bellow of thunder exploded directly overhead, so loud the hood enchanters fell to their knees, clutching their heads and moaning. Fountains of blood jetted up from the altar, scribing impossible lines in the air, symbols that made Rifkin's head throb just to see them. He squeezed the trigger again, and the lightning came for him. The first thing Rifkin discovered when he woke up was that it had stopped raining. The second was that he had apparently been tied to a tree, and the third was that his head hurt like hell. He blinked a few times and realized he was bound to one of the trees on the edge of the clearing where he'd witnessed whatever the hell he'd witnessed the night before. With that, everything came flooding back. The storm, the knife, the blood, and he found himself bellowing, "Schiller, where are you, you bastard?" "There's no need to shout," came a voice from behind him. And then Schiller stepped out of the shadows. In his left hand was a knife, not the one Rifkin had seen him use before, but a short utilitarian blade that gleamed in the morning's weak light. Rifkin lunged for him, completely forgetting that he was tied up, and succeeded only in rubbing his arms raw against the bark of the tree. "What did you do? Where's Kelly? Let me go, you son of a bitch." "Which first?" Schiller cocked his head for a moment as if he were hearing a sound beyond human rage. "Would you like answers or your freedom? I suspect if I give you the latter, you won't stay around long enough for the former." "Fine. Tell me what happened, then tell me why I shouldn't call the MPs and get your skinny butt arrested." Schiller smiled, showing all of his very white teeth. "I do not think your military policeman will be able to get here in time to arrest me, nor to help you if I chose to do you harm. Which I did not, despite your blundering from the middle of things last night. You killed that girl!" "She was an informant for the Gestapo, used to infiltrate Rifkin's group and betray them to the gun or the gas chamber. Will you wait for her or for the many she betrayed to muddy unmarked graves?" "Nobody deserves to die like that," Rifkin growled, "not even a spy." Schiller sighed. "In the midst of the greatest slaughter the world has ever known, you rage over the sacrifice of one woman, though her death helped save millions. Are you truly that noble, or just a fool?" Rifkin gaped. "Millions? Millions. What you saw last night, what little you saw, was part of something much, much greater. The Order of the Black Sun, they have studied more than just science. They have followed paths of dark power, walking with open eyes into places of horror they might turn and bring that nightmare to us all. The second light across the valley, you remember it, yes?" Grudgingly, Rifkin nodded. "That was, for lack of a better word, a ritual, an invitation sealed in blood to a thing from outside of space and time, calling it to our world so that it might feast on the weak flesh of the Allied armies and halt their advance." "That's insane." Rifkin spat on the ground, tasting blood and rainwater. "First of all, a summoning? What is this, a Murnau flick? Second, even if you're not lying about that, a few rounds from Pershing and nothing. There's no power on earth that could stop such a thing once it was loosed, a terror that walks from world to world, sowing madness and reaping death. The only way to defeat is to prevent it from ever setting foot, if such a thing can be said to have a foot, here in the first place." "Is that why you had us build this, whatever this is?" Schiller nodded, elegantly trimming his nails with a knife as he spoke. "Indeed. The plans you worked from, stolen at great cost from the heart of Wilhelmsburg Castle, in order to create a precise replica of their summoning circle. The site, the ritual, the sacrifice, all had to be identical and simultaneously, to confuse the great beast and trap it between portals. Had you stopped us, or even delayed the stroke of the knife," despite himself, Rifkin shuddered, "or damaged one of the props? Jesus." It was impossible, of course, and completely insane, but there was something terrifying in the way Schiller casually discussed monsters from outer space that chilled Rifkin's blood, because it was very clear that Schiller believed, and that he would have done anything at all to protect his mission. "Or damaged one of the pieces of the set, yes. Your men did masterful work, Captain. They helped save the world, not that the world will ever know. You should be proud. My men, where's Kelly? What did you do to Kelly?" "He is back at your camp, largely unharmed. I simply felt this was a talk we should have alone." Schiller coughed twice. "It really is magnificent what your men did. It's such a shame it will have to be destroyed." "Destroyed?" Rifkin thought for a moment. "To keep anyone else from using it to summon this thing?" Ever so slightly, Schiller smiled. "Ah, you begin to understand. Everything here has been touched by what you might call a great evil. It would not take much to draw it forth again, and so this must be destroyed utterly. No pictures, no souvenirs, no remembrances, and no pilgrimages here after the war is over. Do you understand me, Captain Rifkin?" Rifkin met his eyes. "It'll burn today." "Good. Then our collaboration is at its end. Pray there is never cause for another." And with that, Schiller spun on his heel as if to depart. "Hey, hey!" Schiller stopped mid-turn and looked back over his shoulder. "Yes, Captain? Aren't you going to cut me loose?" Schiller thought for a moment. "No," he said, and walked away.
Very good.
Thank you. Sorry for the technical difficulties in the middle there. And now for the other piece. It's a fantasy story called Seas of Blood and Salt, featuring a recurring character I've published several stories with called Reb Palash, based on a real figure from history who was a pirate, a negotiator, a founder of a synagogue in the Netherlands, and an all-around Renaissance man back in the Renaissance. And I've sort of taken a version of him and given him magical powers and an angel on his shoulder. This is what Red Palash does when he finds a ship crewed by the dead. He does not know it is crewed by the dead, not at first. He is in his cabin, discoursing with the nameless angel who speaks in the silences of his mind. They are speaking of the Pirkei Avot, and debating the words of Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, who held that a man who was pleasing to others was pleasing to Hashem, but the man who was displeasing to others was in turn displeasing to the Lord, when a great shout came down from the crow's nest. A ship, the lookout said, dead ahead and low in the water. And these words that rained down were caught and carried by the men on deck, passed along and repeated until one pounds on Palash's door in his excitement. It is ill tidings, the angel says, for they are ones that cannot go unheard. And if these tidings are pleasing to the men, are they not also pleasing to Hashem? The rabbi jokes, gently, as he rises from where he sits cross-legged on the floor. I asked Rabbi Mendoza questions, he said in his study, and the angel replied, what of the man who was displeasing to his fellow men because he was pleasing to the Lord? And for that he had no answer. Reb Palash does not reply. There is no time for him to do so. For again the sailor is pounding on his door, and now he is shouting, Rebbe, Reb Palash, there is a ship. It's been a while since they have taken a ship, Reb Palash knows. The oceans are vast, and even the greatest galleons are small adrift in it, and the men in his pay work treasure houses of his enemies have fallen silent of late. It would be good to take a ship. The men would find it pleasing. So says Reb Palash to himself and steps out onto the deck. The sailor at the door is beside himself with excitement. It is one of the younger men. The older ones would know better than to do so. The first growth of his beard has just come in. Sparse black hair is curling over a weak chin, and his eyes are white and blue. Joachim, his name is. Palash remembers him now. A dock rat from Zeebrugge who had demanded at Rusty Dagger Point to be taken aboard. He is earnest, and he is eager, and he is too young to think that death will ever find him. Tell me of the ship, Palash says, and Joachim beams. There, he says, and leads his captain to the bow. Can you see her? Indeed, Palash can, though she is near the limits of his vision. It is a merchant vessel he sees, and it seems as if she has not been seen in return. That is not possible. They are too close with the rising sun framing them against the brilliant sea. There should be alarms ringing out across the water. There should be cries of defiance and orders given. There should be, above all, action on that lonely ship. And yet there is nothing as she sails on, serene and unconcerned. He frowns and reaches for his spyglass. Someone puts it in his hand, and he raises it to his eye. Now the ship comes into sharp focus, and the reason she has not fled is clear. She is wounded, this one, wounded and barely afloat. One of her masts is cracked. It hangs over the rail, canvas dragging in the water behind it like a ragged seabird's wing. Only a few sails remain wet, and they are rent by wind and storm. Ropes dangle and twist in the wind. Some are unbound, others have snapped and been left to hang. She flies no flag, this mystery ship, flies no nation or captain's colors. By all rights, Palash thinks she should be abandoned. And yet she is not, for he can see figures on her deck and others in the tatters of her rigging. There are men on board, men who move slowly and patiently about their tasks, men who he thinks might be glad of rescue, but who have not hailed a ship. There is still time to turn away, the angel says. Palash frowns. Behind him he can hear the men. They are anxious. They see prey. The creak of leather armor, the rasp of weapons kissing sheaths, the muttered prayers of the men who are wolf eager to put themselves in harm's way. They form a palpable cloud of longing. They are hungry for the ship. The men are. The look they give him, they look to him to give the order to feast. And yet, the slow, silent men, they give him pause. Close with them, he finally says. Ready the guns, ready the men. But we make no effort to board, not until I am satisfied. Satisfied of what? Asks Joachim, and the others draw a step or two away from him. Palash almost chuckles, that they think asking a question would incur wrath, but instead he just answers. I do not know, he says, and the men shudder. But I will, he continues. And then, like birds exploding from dead tree branches, they all move to make ready. As for Palash, he tucks the spyglass in his belt and walks back towards his cabin. There are preparations to be made there, against he knows not what. Meanwhile, the men swirl around him, sparks in the blaze he has just stoked. The ropes hum as the ship comes about, turning towards the wounded vessel, and the heavy thud of the cannons being made ready as the drumbeat below decks that spurs all their labors. The men will be ready. He hopes he will be as well. It is an hour before they close with the other ship, an hour Palash puts to good use. Shaddai, the name of Hashem that wards against demons, this he inscribes in 9 places along his ship. For each man he has laid out a portion of salt and bread, none to drive away spirits, and he spat 3 times at the base of the wheels that are protected from unwelcome attentions. Only when this is done, when the 91st Psalm has been duly chanted and the proper benedictions recited, does he ready himself for battle. The other ship is close now. He has instructed the helmsman to bring them alongside the vessel so that he might see what sort of prey she would be, and if it is right and proper to take her. It also lets him see the crew and their quality. Something about their steady, slow men disturbs him, and the angel's warning has him on edge. Better to observe first, he thinks, than to commit acts unrighteous or foolish. And then a shout goes up from him as they close, and the men want him at the rail among them. The other ship is perhaps a dozen yards off to starboard, and the gap is closing. Already the men are readying ropes and grappling hooks to tie her fast. Already men are climbing into the rigging with muskets, prepared to make the enemy's deck a killing floor. Already they are here, and there can be no turning back. He stares across the water. The ship is old, he can see that now. The wood of her hull is weathered gray, and deep gouges up and down the lake shore where she has been scarred by the sea and shore in battle. Here and there thick crusts of barnacles and mussels foul her beam like the marks of a pox on a diseased man's back. Pale crabs scuttle here and there, claws snapping. There are no gun ports, or if there are, they have been sealed shut by the relentless growths along the flanks. Here and there, bits of a rail have been torn away by gunfire or by storm. The broken mainmast shows no jagged edges. Time and weather have conspired to smooth the break. This is not a ship that has seen port or the care of man for a very long time. She is defenseless and she is old, and she would not be worth manning with a prize crew bringing back into port. The next storm she sees surely will sink her. But it is not the ship that caused them to pause in giving order aboard. It is the men who sail her. They are men, their form if not spirit. Perhaps a dozen of them are on the deck, working slowly, laboriously at their task. Others cling to the tatters of the rigging. One stands at the wheel, staring straight ahead. None notice the ship alongside them. None turn their heads to see. Their footsteps drag. Their hands are slow and clumsy. As he watches, a spar falls and smashes onto the deck. The men there do not notice and do not call out. Instead, they step over it. Those who do not simply stumble. What are those things, mutters a man at Palash's side. For it is easy to see now how their garments are rent and their flesh is dry and shrunken. Their visages are like skulls, skin pulled tight to the bone, and their eyes show no sign of light or life. And then a wave comes up and sweeps over the ship. It is not a wave of water, rather one of stench. It smells of rotted meat and sickness and dead things left too long in the sun, of floating bodies washed up on beaches and old blood on a surgeon's table. It smells of death, and it smells of fear, and chokes the air from Palash's men's lung. Some call out, some feigned overwhelmed. Most stumble back, coughing and puking. Ready the guns, Palash says. We need no part of this one. Its cargo is death. Below decks, the guns on their runners slam into place. The smell of black powder burning threads its way into the corruption, a tickle of the nostrils to remind the men of who they are. Sink her, says Palash, and the guns roar. One after another, the shots slam into the rotted, aged hull of the ship. Splinters fly, shell fragments explode. Smoke blooms and deadly flowers trailing down to the waterline. Again Palash orders, and again his cannon vomit with fire and iron. Again the dead man's ship shudders like a wounded thing. And then the smoke clears, and she is whole. Fresh scars line her, yes, but even as Palash watches, they fade to the dull gray of age, another forgotten line of the ship's ancient story. And on the deck, heads turn. He has been seen, Palash knows, seen and judged and found wanting. The empty dead eyes are not empty now. They burn with hate, and they burn with hunger. Slowly, the withered hands on the ship's wheel turn, and she responds, groaning. She's coming for us, Joachim shouts, and it is true. The prey has become the hunter, and it is closing. Hard starboard, all speed, and keep firing, sweep the decks. Palash is in motion even as he gives the orders. Behind him, the men aim their guns at the grim figures on the deck of the other ship. Canvas flaps open and bellies with wind. Small thunderclaps dot the deck as Palash's ship turns away and runs. From the other ship, the creaking moan of ancient wood under duress, and the flat, wet smack of lead-hitting flesh. Just like their ship, the men do not fall. Indeed, it seems as if they move about their tasks with a renewed vigor. The grappling hook sails out somehow from the dead men's vessel. It snags the railing and pulls taut, but then Palash is there and he cuts the rope. It falls away into the sea, even as others clang and bounce off the sides of the ship. More sail, he bellows, and the men leap to respond. But he was incautious, and he let them get too close, and where the wind hit the breath of stench, it dies. They're not falling, Joachim cries, standing at Palash's elbow as he turns and gives the sailor his knife. Cut the lines, he says. Do not let them close. And then he is running back to his cabin to the hidden chest he keeps therein. It is carved in mahogany and bound in brass, and it sits cunningly hidden against one of the walls. No man on board has seen it open. Few know it even exists. Inside, Kalash keeps rare and dangerous things: the finger bone of a man possessed by demons, a vial of tears cried by one of the elite gleam, a stone from the wreckage of the first temple. Buried among these are two small terracotta jugs, unmarked and tightly corked. It is these that Kalash takes, for within them dwells fire. The other ship is close now, too close. No more ropes fly from her deck. Rather, it is the splintered wreck of her figurehead that ruins. The serpent hacked in half long ago and edged like daggers. Gunfire still blasts across her deck, smacking into wooden flesh, but it does no good. Salt purifies and protects. Fire cleanses, he says, and launches the first jug. It spins through the air and then crashes to the desk of the other ship. There it shatters, spilling pale white liquid in the vast arc. One of the dead men, the first, turns, sees this. He raises one bony hand to point at the Rebbe, and he shrieks. The others take it up, a chorus of the dam that drowns out the guns and the wind and the waves. It is the voice of the cold wind that blows at funerals, the early frost that freezes the harvest, and it drops Joachim into his knees. One man falls from the rigging, screaming. He hits the deck with a wet, cracking sound, bone and meat splitting open in a single instant. Kalash turns, sure he can do nothing for the man. On the deck, Joachim whimpers. He has dropped the second jug, and it is rolling away. The ribeye seizes it and throws. It follows the arc of its brother up and over the gap between ships before plunging down. The men watch it. The dead men watch it. The world seems frozen that instant, all save Kalash, who draws his pistol and fires, and the world explodes into flame. The screaming stops, replaced by a single howl of surprise. Flames erupt all along the deck of the ship. They climb the rope of the rigging and leap into the sails. They dance from bow to stern, and they run down to the waterline. The dead men stagger about. Some are caught in the conflagration and burn themselves. Others are merely trapped. Kalash's ship, Kalash's men, these are forgotten. Now, he commands, and his men drop their blades and their guns. It is time to flee. They will leave the burning hulk to its fate. Let it, and whatever cargo it holds, sink beneath the waves. A hot wind blows from the dead men's ship. It fills the sails, filling them fat, and Kalash's ship leaps forward. As the fiery wreck recedes in the distance, the true wind picks up. The ship flies over the waves, and the flames are left far behind. In an hour they are barely visible, and 2 they are gone. The men celebrate their escape, and Kalash does a divination that suggests their luck will be changing soon. There is cheering, and there is drinking, and there is joy, the joy of men who know they are lucky to be alive. It is 6 days later. Kalash is on deck as the sun sets, having said the evening prayers. There are fewer men with him than there were a week ago. 2 days prior, they took a merchant ship out of Santander, and he had manned it with the prize crew. If all went well, they would see each other again in Harlem in a month's time. Until then, they would cruise and seek targets of opportunity and take what the sea gave them. A whistle from above catches his attention. It is an early warning of bad weather on the horizon, one as he has heard 1,000 times before. The men do not need him to give them orders. They know their work. They set to it with a will. Instead, he takes out his spyglass and observes. The wall of cloud the lookout spotted is plainly visible, dark gray and shot through with strange lightning. There is no chance to run before the storm. It is coming too fast. Better, he thinks, to reef the sails and ride it out, and be caught unprepared and driven by the wind. Some of the younger crew have not seen rough weather, and it will be good for them to learn. Already the wind is picking up, and the spray of the waves is crashing onto the deck. Smiling, he raises his spyglass, and then he sees her. From the storm she emerges, still dragging her tattered canvas across the water. She burns, oh how she burns. From stem to stern she is alight with flame. Even the sodden canvas of her shattered sail burns, sending steam hissing up into a vast cloud. She is impossible. She is burning. She is closing on them, and closing fast. The men can see it too now. Some stop to point, others to pray. One lunges for the rail, to throw himself overboard, and he is only restrained at the last. The tide of panic rises. Men, Kalash billows. They stop, they turn, they look at him. He must be careful now. If he fails to convince them, they are all lost. There will be but one more encounter with this dead ship, one they must win, and panicked men win no battles. And he calms them, he soothes them, he tells them to see the ship, that he will deal with their pursuer. The older men trust him, the younger ones follow their lead. They return to their labors, double quick now. As for Kalash, he takes something from his cabin, and he looks across the waters. The burning ship is drawing near, closing the gap with vengeful speed. He can feel its heat, and he looks up. He climbs the rigging, as agile as men half his age. There is no other way. He cannot allow the dead ship to ram him. The flames cannot be permitted to leap from sail to sail. So he climbs, and he says an invocation to Shaddai under his breath, and he does not look down. And when he reaches the top, he leaps. For a second, he thinks he has misjudged, that he's jumped too soon. The burning sails look terribly far away, and he knows he will not reach them. Then suddenly he is lifted and borne up and slams into a nest of smoldering ropes with thunderous force. You? He asks the angel silently. Salt purifies and protects, the angel replies. Fire cleanses. Go down and see what you find. There are already dead men coming towards them, their bodies wreathed in flame. They burn and are not consumed, unholy in their endurance, and their knives and swords blades too. The first to reach him thrusts with a broken dagger. Palash twists, blade rushing past, then shoves the dead man back and away. It loses its grip on the rigging and falls, one ankle snagged in the rope holding it dangling above the inferno of the deck. Two more surge past it, attacking in unison. Palash parries one and kicks the other in the face. It does not fall. Instead, it rears back for another swing, and when it does so, he drops down upon it. He cannot get its sword up in time, and Palash crashes into it, fingers scrabbling for the ropes. Its sword goes crashing down as it tries to rid himself of its unwelcome passenger, and then its partners swing and Palash lets go, and the one dead man hacks the head from the shoulders of the other. He pauses for a moment, perhaps understanding what it has done, and Palash seizes it by the leg. It turns toward him, but it is too late. He has already pulled it away from the ropes, and it is falling. So it goes until Palash reaches the deck, wreathed in fire. Through the flames, he can see the outline of the ship, so very close. A half dozen flames have jumped the gap. Men are pouring buckets of seawater over them. Time, he knows, is running out. More dead men come at him. He swings, he parries, he dodges, and he dances. There is no winning any of these fights, trapped between the walking dead and the conflagration that will not die. There's only escaping to take another step, another breath, and hoping he can find what he seeks before too late. Then abruptly there it is, the stairs leading below decks. The corpse rises up in front of him. He smashes it in the forehead with the pommel of his sword, and it goes over backwards, arms spinning. Palash leaps after it down into the dark. When he lands, the breath is squeezed out of him, not by the impact, though the dry crunch of matchstick bones underneath his feet tells him he has landed on his late adversary. No, this is the place where the cold wind of death and rot originated, and this is where it dwells. The flames have not reached here, but dim light from their work shows somehow through, and what it illuminates is a horror beyond comprehension. There are men here, or pieces of them, and children and women as well. All are bound, all have been cut by the butcher's knife, flayed and vivisected and brutally hacked. This one's legs are gone, that one is missing her tongue and eyes. Still others are laid open, their skin lovingly pinned back so that Palash can see where this organ or that one has been harvested as a delicacy. And all are still alive. They do not speak, they cannot speak. They have been here too long, have been subjected to too much pain. Some manage wordless howls, others merely whimper, and all plead wordlessly for release. It is all he can do not to cry out, to demand an explanation for how such a thing can exist. Instead, he takes his sword and slashes the throat of the nearest victim, a man whose face has been cut away till his visage is not but bone. The blood gushes. Palash stands back to observe his work, and the chained man, the man hoisted high on a metal hook through the flesh of his back, a man whose eyes rest in a ruin of dry blood and broken bone, he raises his one raising hand in supplication. As above, so below. As the deathless sailors cannot die, neither can their prey. This is the harder thing, the angel says, where it begins and ends. There is a rumbling crash, and Palash is thrown from his feet. He can hear wood splinter and flames crackle, and men shouting in alarm and rage. There is no more time. He must find a way to kill the deathless before his men are taken by them, before his men wind up down here. He stands and spits 3 times, as is proper when seeking to banish evil from a place. Blood sloshes around his ankles, the undying around him moan. The ship shudders again. He can hear gunfire now, and the clash of steel. There are shouts of alarm and a smell of thick smoke. Bits of burning canvas drift down through the hatch, illuminating the hellish scene before him. Fire cleanses, he thinks. But this place has not been cleansed. It is unholy. It resists. It must be made ready to burn. With that, he sheathes his sword. Footsteps clatter on the stairs, and he sees dead men coming for him. There is no room to maneuver here, no way to defeat them. The first one sets foot in the rolling foulness. It turns, sword ready, and favors Palash with a grin. It is the one who first met his eyes, the one who first knew him. Palash does not draw his sword. Instead, he reaches in the pouch of his belt, digs deep, and brings out both hands filled with gleaming white. Salt purifies. Salt protects. The dead man shrieks and charges. Palash opens his hand and flings the salt in all directions. It strikes the bound victims, and they sag against their bonds. One single grain is enough to free them. Where the salt touches the dead men, they burn. The flame of the deck snake down to embrace them, stripping them of their unnatural vitality and leaving them burned husks. The last collapses at Palash's feet, sword arm outstretched, the pool of blood hissing and steaming around its blackened corpse. And where the pure and blessed salt touches the ship itself, there the ship burns too. The unclaimed thing that dwelt here, that animated muscle and sinew, beam and spar beyond death is gone, driven out. There's a final gust of the foul-smelling wind, and then Red Palash is alone in the hull of a burning ship, with the peaceful dead all around him. The aged wood burns quickly, he sees, the years catching up to it in an instant. Surely, he thinks, his men will be pulling away. He has taught them that much. that they are to save the ship themselves. He prays they remember. With a sharp crack, a section of the hull gives way. Dark water pours in. The only question is, will the ship burn to the waterline before it sinks? Palash does not know. Another plank gives way, and then another. To stay here is certain death. The stairs leading up from the stinking den of torment are gone, devoured by flame. More planks are breaking as the ship comes apart. Choose, the angel says. He does, and leaps, and then all goes black. It is Joachim who pulls him from the water, who lifts him into the little jolly boat from the waves. Thank you, he says. He brought him on board, and a blanket is wrapped around him. There's a canteen of water for him, and a skin of wine and bread as well. Are they gone? Joachim asks, after what must be a suitably respectful wait. The ship, I mean. Polish nods. We will not be troubled by them again. He pauses and waits for the angel to say something, but an invisible companion is silent. Perhaps he agrees. Perhaps this knowledge is not for Palash, not yet. Good, Joachim says, and pauses. The other men in the boat bend to their oars. The steady chop of the water is soothing. The storm is gone, having crumbled as the ship and shepherd have burned. The waves are small and gentle. In the distance, the ship, Palash's ship, waits, and so do the rest of his men. All is well. He closes his eyes then, trusting no further adventure will before them over the last 100 yards of open water, and drifts towards sleep. And as he does, he hears Joachim say, softly, sorry about that.
What is he saying? What does he say?
Say softly, I think when we put in Zeebruggen again, I'll be going home.
Well done.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us for this.